Hello, everyone who is watching, and hopefully those who have watched me before. I continue with my testimony. And just to make clear, I share my testimony and some of my most innermost personal experiences for one reason and one reason only. I would like to illustrate just how worthwhile it is to make a connection with the giver of life, to make a connection with the one who, the creator of the universe, the one who is out there big, but also down here with us at the level of our own smallness. So last time I ended with the description, with the experience of me peeling apples whilst I was listening to the line from Handel's Messiah. He was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And I said that everything that I went through in my school experience as a teacher just began to make sense. The feeling of being shunned and despised, it's very strong words, but there was definitely an element of that in my experience. Today I'd like to just share a very small portion of my experience that happened just a little later, and once I've actually decided to leave my job, not because of the rejection, but because stuff there has been resolved and I needed a break because I was very stressed after 4 years of trial and trouble, and I was trying to conceive and was not able to do so. So I thought it was because of the stress. Anyway, around about, I think it must have been summer 1985, I went back home to Israel to visit my family. I live in England and have done for 45 years now. And needless to say, this was at the very end of my time at school. I'd already given up my job, handed in my notice, and I was feeling quite exhausted but relieved. But when I got home to my mum's house, my parents' house, there was every possible trouble under the sun. My father had a mini heart attack and he was in hospital. My mother was anxious and agitated because of that, of course, but because of something else. My middle sister had an altercation with a woman who chucked hot water on her chest. My brother's just lost his job living in Tel Aviv. In short, it was very turbulent, and I felt so burdened with the whole thing. And one night, having been for a walk with my mom around the kibbutz where I come from in Upper Galilee in the north of Israel, trying to encourage her. For me, that was always my role. I was the eldest and I was always trying to encourage everybody else, no matter what I was going through. And I felt it was essential that I comfort my mother and calm her down. And eventually we came back home to our house, and I remember she was lying on the settee, in fact, and I was giving her a massage. It was funny because I was giving her a massage to comfort her and to wind her down, and I remember dropping a drop of oil on the settee, and Mum was really upset. She always used to be upset about things like this. You know, everything, if anything, tiny little thing went wrong, or if somebody broke something. She was a perfectionist. But in any case, once that was finished and she was more comforted, she went to her bedroom and I stayed on the sofa where I actually slept, because there was no spare room in my mother's house at that time. But I lay down, unable to sleep, feeling so burdened, heavy-hearted. In fact, it was such a heavy feeling around my chest, on the right-hand side actually, all the way up my throat. And I felt as if I was about to give up my breath. It was so tough. So I was so anxious. Finally, all of a sudden, very gently and briefly, I saw across the length of my body, above me, a beautiful luminous cross. It came in for a second and then it subsided. And all of a sudden I felt able to go to sleep. I just remember before I fell asleep, I was thinking, gosh, I wonder what that was. And that's all. That's the only thing I thought. Finally, I fell asleep, and in the morning when I woke up, I went and sat over the other side of my mother's house on a bench. There's a little stream running at the back of my mother's garden and separating between our home and the kibbutz hotel. And I remember feeling relief. I remember I was able to weep for the first time. And I remember thinking, what was I thinking? What was I thinking, taking on me the whole of my family's burden? There were the thoughts that were running through my mind as I was quietly weeping and feeling relief. And that's all. That's all that happened. I didn't come to faith. I didn't believe particularly because of this event. I just went through it. Just went through the experience. When the time came for me to come back to England, I went to the plane and I felt still very sad, deep sadness inside me, not really feeling I knew whether I was coming or going and what was happening. And I remember just plugging my ears to the music and on the aeroplane, and there was beautiful Hasidic songs being played, very touching, very sweet. And I just wept. I listened to the songs and just wept. I didn't care about anybody being around me. For me, at that time of my life, weeping, I felt, was always so helpful. And I decided I wouldn't think or care about what other people thought. I just was as discreet as I was able to be. And I felt this was an ongoing, a type of healing, if you like. When I touched down in Heathrow and came back home to my husband, and back to, in fact, not knowing which way I was going to go in terms of work or a job or conceiving or anything like that. It was all very bleak and uncertain. For days, I would just walk and walk and walk and walk around the town, in fact, Reading in England, along the Thames and various places. And in fact, in town, wherever I went, and passed by a church, and you know there's often a cross at the top of a church. Every time I passed by a church, the cross kind of like came towards me, and I was just weeping and weeping. And just for once, I did not allow my intellect to analyze what was going on. I felt must have been the Lord at that time, even though I did not know him or acknowledge him at that point in time. I felt the Lord's hand must have been on me to just allow this thing to happen, whatever it was. And I did a lot of weeping that year, 1985 to 1986. And in fact, in that time of darkness, I felt drawn into a beautiful revelation. It was not anything wow, like so many people tell it. It was not like luminous or bombastic or miraculous, but it was very deep. And the one thing that I remember, that with which I will end this particular live, is I perceived in my spirit a terrible darkness everywhere. Everything was dark. And then I remember thinking of the universe being dark. One particular day, I had this experience of the darkness of the universe, the whole cosmos, and then in the middle of it, in the depth of it, in the indent of it, I'm not sure how to describe it, I perceived the cross. I knew somehow in my heart that the cross story, Jesus crucified, was true. And it was in the darkness that I perceived it. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is true. What am I going to do? I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli. How can I possibly relate to this? It doesn't feel right. But it did feel right because it made sense of everything that I had gone through. And from then on began that journey of connection. The journey of connection for me, for my soul, for my spirit, very personal. With, at that point, a sense of the cosmic significance of the crucifixion of Christ. And I realized that it's a great privilege for me that I was able to, in fact, experience that death before I experienced all the glorious, amazing things the Lord has done for me in my life that lifted the burden and lifted the sadness. So it seems like if anyone wants to be deep with Him, deep in connection, you have to feel deeply as well. You have to have gone through something in life. But by faith, anyone can come to know this connection. And here I will end. Good day to everyone.